Welcome to Birken Forest Monastery Livestream. I'm Ajahn Sona, and today we will endeavor to answer some of your questions. And I see we have some people listening, watching from all over the world. And let us begin, Pia.
Ajahn, our first question is from Kenton in Toledo, Ohio, United States. Stream entry is described as an instantaneous realization of insight. Do the successive achievements on the stream, once returner, non-returner, arahant, have a similar, quote, moment of realization?
Kenton, yes. That is the conventional description of each of these stages. They occur in a single moment. And much is actually discussed about this in the commentaries and so forth, and what happens, how long does it take. So there's two parts to it. In each stage, there's a path moment and then a fruition moment. And there's various descriptions in the commentaries of around this, the phenomena of this moment of realization. I don't think it's much different than other realizations we've had in our lives, where we've had a transforming moment where something has occurred to us, a decision to, kind of a vision that where we decide to change our lives, or we decide to move away or quit our job, or something like this, to assert ourselves or to be less problematic with other people. We have a revelation of vision. I mean, this words like vision and revelation are kind of spectacular. You think you see something shining in the sky, or God visits you or something, but really, humans all have revelations all the time, and they're very important revelations, and they change the way you feel about things and the way you direct your life. And they happen in a moment, in a finger snap. They may have been building up, by the way, gradually over time, and they probably are, almost always. But they suddenly occur, and their impact is sudden. So that's approximately what happens, yeah. Next.
Ajahn, our next question is from Dai in Tasman, New Zealand. Venerable Sir, please, how am I to relate to the present individual and group protestations that I experience from the non-vaxxers, anti-vaxxers, freedom of rights, and anarchists among us? And further, how to understand what thoughts and actions cause both individual and collective karma?
What a timely question. Well, it's timely, but it's also nothing new. Like, there's always something going on. You never get 100% agreement amongst humans, never. And there's always going to be a certain 10%. They're going to have strong, fringy differences, etc. And sometimes they're very exalted. So they come from both ends of the spectrum. Sometimes there's a fringe that is very ignorant, and there's sometimes a fringe that is very informed, that show the way into the future, to show the way to better things, and sometimes that people who are confused, etc. So this is going on. This is not peculiar to this time or this issue. It's always going on like that. There's a spectrum, what we call the bell curve, in terms of human nature and human intelligence and human emotional development, human capacity for understanding things. It's a bell curve, and on one end of the curve is absolute incomprehension, and the other end of the curve is brilliant enlightenment. So this is what we're seeing manifest in the population. There'll be another issue after this where exactly the same thing happens, and it can be exactly the same people holding the same positions. So, first of all, just addressing the particular issue of the vaccines and the pandemic and everything, I should read a statement. So we, as a group of more than 30 monasteries around the world, we have made a policy statement about our attitudes of the monastery towards this pandemic and the vaccination programs and all of this kind of stuff. So I'll actually have to read it to you. And this is on the forestsangha.org, a website that is the main communicator for the branch monasteries of the Ajahn Sangha. So this is what they say here. With the overall well-being of the residents and visitors to our monasteries in mind, the official international branch monasteries in the global community of Venerable Ajahn Chah follow the legislation and healthcare guidelines in our respective countries. This is our communal policy. So we've had to sit down, talk, and agree on these things. And so that is where we were in line. Before this was published, Birken Monastery has been closed during the pandemic. And it's coming up almost on 2 years that we've been closed to visitors. But we have 10 to 11 residents here that are continuously in residence. And in British Columbia, where the monastery is, British Columbia is a province of Canada. Why am I saying this? Because there's people from all over the world listening to this. And so British Columbia is a large province on the west coast of Canada. And it has various policies regarding the vaccinations and so forth. And so we follow the guidelines that the government mandates. And all of us here have had our vaccinations and booster shots. And we also have what are called vaccine passports. So if you go into, we hardly ever go out. I mean, basically, the pandemic doesn't really affect us because we're so isolated to begin with. We're almost always in quarantine as monastics and lay people who are living in monasteries. This is our lifestyle, is like a very quiet lifestyle. You're not running around out to restaurants and so forth, out to nightclubs or entertainment or going here and there. And we don't have to go out to work either. So it hasn't much effect on us. But when they issued this passport that you have to show to get into a store or a restaurant, we all got that passport. That's fine. And so we're cooperative with this. I have no quarrels with it, no suspicions about it. I don't know all of the fine details about vaccinations. I'm not sure anybody on the planet really knows everything about these things, but the people who should know are the mainstream medical science. And by the way, in terms of getting information about this, where do monks, or let me speak for myself, as this monk here, who do I look to get information about health policies or medical issues? I look to medical professionals. I don't ask other monks. I don't ask somebody to read my palm or astrology or philosophers or anybody else. I'm interested in what mainstream, peer-reviewed medical science says about these things, and I'm not interested in the fringes or spiritual advice because it's completely out of our realm of specialty. And if I want advice on physics, I ask physicists, and I ask mainstream, peer-reviewed physicists about this. If I want advice on Theravada Buddhism, I ask long-experienced, well-informed Theravada Buddhists about Theravada Buddhism, but not a physicist about that. I don't ask a scientist about Theravada Buddhism, and I don't ask Theravada Buddhists to tell me all about science. So this is the way I approach getting information on this, and so, and I well understand there's going to be differences, and some people are put in very awkward positions by this pandemic. And I did give a talk right at the beginning of the pandemic by invitation from the Thai monastic Sangha in North America. They asked me to speak on how to respond in in a sensible way to the pandemic. And the Buddha has lots of good advice for such things. This isn't the first time in history that droughts, wars, tsunamis, pandemics, catastrophes have happened. It is innumerable times in history, and it will happen again. And spiritual language and spiritual advice is for those times. It's timeless. So this is one of the features of the Dhamma. There's a Pali word, akaliko, timeless. The Dhamma is timeless. It applies and works in all kinds of situations, in pandemics, and when everything is great, when the economy is good, when the economy is bust, when everything is abundant, when everything is in scarcity, in peace and in war, all of these situations, in old age, in youth, when sick, when well. This is the nature of the Dhamma. It has strategies, emotional strategies, visionary strategies for all of these situations. But we're not experts on every scientific question, every medical question, every psychological question, every economic question. And no, I hope nobody thinks they are. And there appears to be a lot of people that seem to have an opinion. It doesn't matter whether somebody's invading Afghanistan or whether it's a vaccine and so forth. They seem to know all of this stuff, but I doubt that they do. So that's how I look at this. Inform yourself from people who have the best credentials and try to stabilize your emotions in approaching this. And when you look at other people's reactions, have great understanding. Not everybody really has the benefit of serene and intelligent counsel. Lots of people are surrounded by people who have poor judgment, and they themselves do not have the skills, education to access good information. They don't know where to look. And so this is the situation that a good deal of humanity is in. And so we have empathy for them, sympathy for them, and understand how if you live by just the conviction of your emotions, you will have a lot of suffering in your life. So we're very fortunate to actually have access to Dhamma and the idea of serenity, equanimity, goodwill, and hopefully you have access to people who have good judgment about where to get information and how to assess that information. So that's how we would come to this. But in the meantime, these are the more or less the policies by agreement of the branch monasteries, and Birken Forest Monastery certainly abides by that as well. So, next question.
From Ali in Iran. Dear Ajahn, is there actually, quote, good or, quote, bad? Or are these just labels we give to objects dependent on our feelings? For example, we can eat an apple fruit. It nourishes us and tastes pleasant to us. Therefore, we call it, quote, good. So planting an apple tree could lead to a, quote, good result. Similarly, planting a tree with poisonous fruits that results in our illness and suffering would be considered a negative action. But both are just trees, and neither are inherently good or bad. Is this false labeling what ignorance is?
Well, that is a very philosophical question, and of course that's what philosophers have engaged in, this idea. By the way, I want to quote Shakespeare to you. Nothing is either good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. So that's a Shakespearean quote. Now, whether Shakespeare believed it or cared about it, it was just good language. But it's a way of some philosophies look at the universe that way, say, our ideas of good and bad are just arbitrary, it's just the way we think, etc. Buddhism has a basis, and it begins this way. There is suffering. And then the Buddha defines what suffering is. So he is not a general philosopher. He says there's one main issue in human existence, and it is suffering itself. And then he defines what suffering is, and it's a combination of all the variety of physical distress that we can have, and then the emotional distress. And he proposes that there is a cause for our emotional distress. And if you want to call, yes, we could say that the suffering, pain, and emotional distress is something we wish to be free of, and that non-stress, positive emotions such as loving kindness, generosity, kindness, and clarity are something we want to develop and preserve, and that greed, hatred, and delusion are something we wish to free ourselves from and let go to cessation. And so the Buddha clearly sets those out. And by the way, he doesn't have a whole long philosophy trying to justify this. He says, look, if you don't agree that it's unfortunate that people suffer when they don't have to, and any sensitive living being suffering when they don't have to, then I really can't persuade you any further, because it's not a mathematical proposition. I can't make, if you don't agree, if you think suffering is good, perfectly good, I can't persuade you, and I won't try to persuade you. I'm just making the proposition, if you agree with it, here's the strategy for reducing suffering amongst living beings. So that's the approach the Buddha has. He's a very pragmatic philosopher. That is, pragmatic just means that one is interested in what works, and what works specifically to reduce suffering amongst conscious living beings. And so he has a strategy for that. And he says, follow this strategy and you can find your way out of this. But he doesn't spend much time trying to persuade people beyond that. If you're not persuaded by terrible grief, sorrow, terrible pain and distress, and the grief, lamentation, weeping, depression, catastrophization, so all these things, if you're not persuaded that that is a problem, then he won't spend much time with you trying to persuade you. He will say, well, then go ahead, you'll get plenty of suffering. And so that's how he approaches that, rather than as a philosophical thing, is good and bad real in the world. And by the way, of course, when we refer to a tree, the object as good or bad, a tree that is poisonous to humans is neither good nor bad, and a fruit tree is neither good nor bad. It's the use of that word. You're using the word good and bad in two different contexts. One is moral, and the other one is a taste preference. So is a C major chord played on the piano good or bad? If it was supposed to be a C sharp major chord and you play a C major chord, then it's bad. But it's not morally bad. It's harmonically bad. Or in the convention of music, it's out of place, etc. So when we use these words good and bad, we have to say specifically, what do you mean? Which kind of good and which kind of bad are you talking about here? So that's important to clarify that. And any good philosopher will clarify which type of bad and good are you speaking of. So I think that's enough for now on that. Pia, next question.
Ajahn, our next question is from Anonymous in Maryland, United States. Can you expound on working with fear of future physical suffering, i.e. the specter of the pain associated with a physical ailment? Even if one is comfortable with the idea of death, there remains the challenge of dealing with the aversion to the possibility of a slow, painful death, and all the myriad challenges for yourself and the loved one who might be caring for you or witnessing your passing.
Yes, I think that's a universal concern for most people, as most people would say that some people would say that it's not that I mind dying. It's just that I don't want the pain. It's the pain is what I'm worried about. Long, drawn out, painful deaths. And so that's often one of the concerns. But does it help to be afraid of the pain? I mean, the pain is bad enough. All you can do is make it worse. And of course, if you worry about it ahead of time, in fact, you may die suddenly and without any particular pain ahead, and then you will have spent a substantial portion of your life inflicting emotional pain on yourself unnecessarily. So the strategy is that not to generate fear of the possibility of pain, because it's not certain that it will occur in any strong way associated with death. Death may occur very suddenly. And so you would have wasted your time and inflicted pain on yourself fearing pain. The second thing is, yes, it's possible that a long, drawn-out, painful period could precede death. And there's only one way to make it worse, and that is to wish it wasn't happening, to fear it, and to ask, why me? These are questions, these are attitudes which really make it much worse. And also to think, oh, I don't want to burden everybody. Why should they have to take care of me, etc.? Well, that's another unskillful attitude. Humans have to take care of each other. You have to take care of yourself and sort of not to be an unusual burden on somebody, an unnecessary burden. But they have to take care of you, and you have to take care of them when they need it. And that's part of the human experience. And if you do not, there are cultures where they don't take care of you. It's quite outrageous to see a culture has no compassion, no empathy for people who are sick or broken or fragile. And there are cultures like that. There are small communities that have lost all sense of empathy and compassion and do not concern themselves with the suffering of others. It's disturbing. It's a disturbing sight. So, in some ways, a sick person is a gift. It's an opportunity for love and compassion, and the reality of our inevitable sickness and death that must happen, and it makes us philosophers when we see that we all must get sick, we all must die, and by the way, there's no certainty about the time. It can happen early in life, in the middle of life, in late old age, but it happens, and so that's reality, and it forces you towards dealing with this issue. It makes you push towards wisdom. So this prospect of pain is one of the reasons that for spiritual practice, this is a reason why we try to get our act together to deal with these frightening prospects, because usually the individual is not all that wise and can't come up with strategy. All it does is frighten them. So is there somebody wise enough to find a way through this and share that information with us? Because it's well worth researching ahead of time. Once you're really in the grip of sickness, it's hard to pay attention. It's hard to learn new lessons, etc. So it's time, when you're well, that's the time to do it. So that's the strategy. And deepen your wisdom and your realist attitudes to life, and don't inflict any extra fear on yourself when facing the prospect of physical pain. Don't add the dimension of emotional distress to it. Okay, Pia.
Our next question is from Matus in Wrocław, Poland. In the Chigala Sutta, the metaphor of turtle and climate crisis versus gradual path and relax to the max. How to be gradual and cool, knowing about the uniqueness of living in a Dhamma world and that there may not be much time left.
His name was
Matus.
Matus. Okay, so all of you who heard that question, you're perfectly clear about what that was? I bet you aren't, but I am. So he quotes from the Chigala Sutta about a tortoise, and then he affiliates that with climate change. Now that question, if you're not familiar with all these things, is utterly obscure, but really the tortoise simile is about how if one falls into the lower realms, how hard it is to get up out of it, how long it takes to get to human birth. That human birth is a rare occurrence, and it's very, very precious that we use it well and that we ensure that we don't descend. During our human life, there's a high inclination. It's very easy to go downhill. It's not easy to go uphill. It's much easier to walk downhill than uphill. And in human life, there's a tendency to just go the easy way. But it leads down. It leads down into more animalistic types of consciousness and so forth. And we have then wasted our precious opportunity as a human to understand things. Now, he relates this to climate change, and I presume he's talking about global warming or global heating, actually, is the word. And that we, he also says, taking it easy on the path, on the path of liberation. What if things go badly with this global warming business, and the world starts to heat up, and then droughts occur, and we cause chaos, civilization starts to unwind, and it turns into a primitive kind of thing. We go back to caves and so forth. And have we lost the opportunity for spiritual practice? What a shame. So this kind of is a urgency message. How do we approach the path as a gradual path in the face of the possibility of a rather hasty end to human civilization? By the way, this question is the contemporary question because of global warming, but we have forgotten about something else which is very world-ending, and that is nuclear war. And when I was growing up, I was one of those kids in the 50s that was, that did their special hide under the desk when the air raid siren goes off. You're supposed to crouch under your desk. This is for possibility of a nuclear war. I don't know how much somebody 7 years old in grade 2 crouching under their desk, how much that's going to do when the nuclear warhead lands. But I was raised with that, and that's a kind of a very, very sudden end to civilization. What did Einstein say? Somebody asked him about the Third World War, and he says, "I don't know what about the Third World War, but if it's atomic, I know what the weapons in the Fourth World War will be. It'll be sticks and stones, because there won't be anything left. You'll be back to sticks and stones." So this is what I was raised with, and that's actually a much more pressure, time-sensitive kind of end of the world scenario. So, and I asked, when I first went, I was in my 20s when I first went to visit a Tibetan Lama. And I had a choice between going to visit this Lama and going to a demonstration against a particular part of a nuclear bomb that was being made near Toronto. It was a sighting mechanism on it. And a few of my friends were going to this demonstration against this atomic bomb gadget. And I asked them, I'm here meditating, but I'm wondering, if we don't stop the nuclear thing, how is this? We're not going to be able to meditate. So which one has got the priority here? Should I spend my time meditating, or should I spend my time in kind of like social action trying to prevent nuclear war? And he gave me an answer that I would never have come from, say, a professor at the University of Toronto, either of social issues or political issues or even scientific question, he couldn't have responded. He said, world systems, it has happened many times. Worlds come and go. And that was an answer that nobody else could have given me except perhaps a Buddhist monk. It's a vision of life that universes come and go, world systems come and go, and there's endless possibilities for destruction in these things. And when should we meditate if not now? Because the situation is always precarious. So this idea of a gradual path, a laid-back path, is not necessarily the Buddhist attitude. The situation is actually urgent in your personal life because you don't know when you're going to die and what circumstances that you will have in the future. And it's important, and it doesn't mean that you are ignoring the grave peril, which is in all kinds of aspects of human life for civilization. There are political perils, there are major wars, there are pandemics, there's the nuclear threat has not gone away. If you look at the nuclear clock, it's 2 minutes to midnight right now. There's global heating, global warming, and all kinds of other ecological impending possibilities. So we're in the midst of this all the time, and it's very urgent that we do our spiritual practice and that we contribute to goodwill and stabilization of the world, and that we encourage the solving, the practical solutions to these problems. So it's not that we do nothing about them. By the way, if you come and visit our monastery here, all you can see is my face staring at you. But our monastery is off grid, and it has 20 kilowatts of solar panels facing a very beautiful February sun glistening off the snow, and it's producing vast amounts of clean electricity at the moment. We have super insulated buildings and all of this. We're very interested in trying to contribute in our own little way to the improving of the environment. And of course, Buddhism is essentially anti-war all the time. They're for peace and against war, including, of course, nuclear war. So we're in a continuous state of aspiration to peace and the prevention of war and distress, and the encouragement of compassion and civilization and education and harmony amongst different cultures and religions. And so all of these things are not mutually exclusive. They all work together well. And part of the stabilization of all of this is the practice of meditation and the serenity that comes from it, and the value of a meditation community where people who are engaged in the worldly life and the family life can come and visit and get refreshed as well. And of course, this very medium. So why are we doing these YouTube videos? Because we're reaching all the way around the world. And we're talking the encouragement of peace, well-being, and the best practices for preserving civilization and well-being of humans and the rest of the ecology as well. So, let us move on.
It's from our live feed from P in Cork, Ireland. Would Ajahn please share some words on creating art inspired by the Dhamma? With great sincerity and much respect, but are these enough? How to go about it skillfully?
Are these enough? I mean, no. Art is not enough, but it doesn't mean that that's a good reason not to do it, or that we should give up. I mean, art is not the center of meditation or Dhamma, but art can be used to assist and to bring messages to the world and encouragements and communication. It's a form of communication as well, and can assist the Dhamma, assist the well-being of humans. And in fact, of course, the artists themselves may benefit from the activity of producing art, but not all art is equal in terms of its moral value or its of any value. So the essence of Buddhist, like at least in the Buddhist monastic communities, it's not art for art's sake. Now, you know this phrase, art for art's sake. In other words, art is just good in itself, and it doesn't need any explanation. It doesn't need to any kind of justification. That's fine. If you want to follow that, that's fine. But for Buddhist monastic communities and everything, that's not good enough. It's not just doing whatever creative things you want. It has to be at the service of Dhamma. So that's how we describe it. And I think other serious religious traditions also hold art in that position as the support for some sublime type of truth, and not just good for its own sake. People in the outside of that community may observe or may view art as just a thing in itself, and it's good in its own right, etc. But it's not the religious attitude, not the philosophical attitude for art. So this comes up quite often in Buddhist circles. What is the role of art and so forth? And you can see that it's the art of meditation is the true and most important art, and that meditation is not just passing time in peace, but is actually investigation and an aspiration to overcome suffering. So all of the communication arts should support that as well. Yeah.
Our next question is from Dan in Brighton, East Sussex, United Kingdom. Could you talk a little bit about Chitta Nupasana, please? Can it be used as a formal practice, or should it form part of your general awareness during meditation?
Yes, I want to explain for our general audience that Chitta means mind. Nupasana means seeing clearly. So it's a form of mindfulness, and it's mindfulness of the mind contents. It is the third of the four foundations of mindfulness. The first one is the body, the second is feelings, the third is mind, and the fourth is Dhamma categories or Dhamma organized structures. So Chitta Nupasana is awareness of the activities of the mind, and it's described as, am I angry or not? Am I greedy or not? Am I confused or not? Am I having a spiritual clarity, an expansive mind, or a contracted mind? So it's just a little series of dualities. Am I angry or not, greedy or not, etc. So that's a way of, by the way, it's not a complete teaching in itself. And it's something, though, that has to take place in a continuous way, whether you're standing, walking, sitting, or lying down. And you need to observe your mind, be aware of your mind, and know what you're experiencing. But that's not enough. It's not a standalone teaching. Chitta Nupasana is not a standalone teaching. It is embedded in the four foundations of mindfulness, and it is expected that all four foundations of mindfulness will be required, and not only that, but all of the rest of the Eightfold Path will be required for the full understanding and of the position of the utility of Chitta Nupasana, of mindfulness of the mind. You have to understand. So you're instructed to be aware. Am I angry or not? Is that enough? No, it's not enough. You have instructions under right effort. When you're angry, you have to do something about it and not just watch it, not just be aware, but do something about it. There's prevention and removal. And then if you're angry, what are you not? You're not experiencing loving kindness. And then, so shall you bring forth loving kindness? Yes. You don't just get a mark, you don't get an A for effort because you know you're angry. That's just a naive idea, which is completely incomplete and taken one factor of the path out of place. So that's something that I talk about quite frequently and in depth. Go to my YouTube channel and listen to the retreat on mindfulness, 4 Foundations of Mindfulness, and I will explain in depth, repetitively, and insistently about the nature of these things, including the Chitta Nupasana. Yeah. Okay, Pia, let's go on.
Our next question is from Aruna in Redmond, Washington, United States. Dear Ajahn Sona, a few years ago, my 20-plus years of marriage fell apart, and my teenage children were alienated from me for reasons I am unable to comprehend. I tried in every possible way to get in touch with my kids, but nothing worked. Now they are adults, and I am just accepting that this is the way they want it. But I still yearn for some word from them. Is it delusion? Am I not accepting reality?
Well, I think most people could understand. Most people can understand your dismay. These are your children, and this was a marriage that fell apart, which is a very hard experience in itself. And then to be alienated from if your children are not making an effort to communicate with you, yeah, I think anybody listening to this realizes why you would feel not well about this. But either you do something about it, either you try to make contact with them, and if they're insistent that they don't want any contact with you, then you really have to get on with your life, and you have to let it go. And you have to understand also that those children have to deal with you in their mind. You're in their mind. You're their mother. And you cannot be well in this life until you have dealt with your parents. And it doesn't mean that you tell them how bad they were or anything like that. It means that you get over your resentment and anger and negativity and at least come to a state of equanimity and peace regarding them. And so that you are not burdened by this, because it's nature to that person who gave you birth and fed you and changed your diapers and so forth. You wouldn't exist. If they leave you outside as a baby, you'd just die. So you owe them your life. So you had these children, and they're alive because you took care of them. And so whether they think you were unskillful or problematic, or they favor their father over you, or whatever it is, they're going to have to work through that. They will not be well until they do work through that. And but you also have to work through things. And the past is the past. And if you did things that were unskillful and you regret, then you have to say, well, I wouldn't do it that way now, so I'm not that person anymore. I'm another person who has learned along the way. And I also have to ask myself, well, why won't my children talk to me? Do they have some sort of legitimate complaint? And you reach out, but if they're not willing to, then you say, well, then they'll have to get themselves their own spiritual guide, their own psychologist, whatever. You're not their psychologist. You're not their psychiatrist. You're not their spiritual teacher either. You need to take care of yourself and to find some well-being in your life. And they need to find direction and spiritual help in their lives as well. And you're not the one that needs to do that. So yes, you can be you can find well-being again. And it should not rely on whether your children approve of you or disapprove of you. That's their problem. Your issue is find your spiritual path, find peace, find goodwill, find serenity in your own life. And you can.
Ajahn, our next question is from the live feed from Mudita in Alberta, Canada. Dear Ajahn, I hear the word contemplation on breath, on feeling, on thoughts, and so on. I'm having challenges to understand the true meaning. Could you, or please, do you have another word I can try?
Yes, Mudita. Contemplation is a vague word, really. Really, it's about centering your heart on something. It's like you say you go down to the river and enjoy yourself by the river, sitting on the bank, feeling the breeze and listening to the river. That's contemplation. And a beautiful states sweep over you. You may feel that in amongst a group of people. You might feel that when you go into a library. You might feel that with friends. You might feel that in nature. That's contemplation. And that state of serenity and presence is the main ingredient in this contemplation idea. And during that time, thoughts and investigation may come up, and they'll be empowered by your own serenity. So you have true contemplative experiences. Most people do sometimes when you are enjoying yourself just down, feeling the river, feeling the ocean, enjoying the mountains, sitting amongst the trees, sitting on your back deck, just feeling the breeze, watching the birds. This is a beautiful, serene, and contemplative condition. And during that time, great thoughts can come up in your mind. So you are a contemplative, and you just need to know that that's what that word means. That's all.
Our next question is from Juan in Liverpool, United Kingdom. Can the mastery of samatha and jhanas overcome my doubts about Buddhism? If I only practice the 5 precepts and intensify my samatha, where will I eventually reach?
Yes, samatha. Let me explain for the audience that samatha is a form of very great stillness and clarity of mind, balanced clarity of mind. And when he uses the word jhana, means a really profound sense of still lucidity. And yes, you will immediately have confirmed something that there is a supernormal condition of mind that the Buddha talks about, and you will just have had experience of it. And so you will not need faith or anything. You will no longer doubt that about the Buddha's teaching. You will immediately have removed doubts about it because you'll have directly experienced it. There are other elements of the Buddha's teaching that are not immediately confirmed by samadhi, but you will have this one aspect of confirmation. So a great number of doubts will have been swept away. And you also see the connection between samadhi and the 5 precepts. So the 5 precepts are basically the advocacy of virtuous behavior, clarity of mind, and good, very appropriate virtuous behavior, non-intrusion on other people's spaces, non-harm towards others, a protective sense and appreciation of others, the others' wish for well-being. When you'll see the connection between having that and samadhi. You can't really have the samadhi if you don't have a good sense of virtue, because at the roots of virtue is basically goodwill, is loving kindness, and seeing yourself in others. So this is the revelation that you and others have similar experiences in life, your biological processes, and you don't like violence towards you. You don't like people hurting you or stealing your things and so forth. And you think they're just like me. They don't like that. A lot of people they don't seem to have the ability to see themselves in others, that others are like them. So this is called empathy. This is the core, this is the roots of virtue. This is the golden rule: do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. So some people don't get that. If you don't get it, you won't get serenity. You won't be able to enter that. But when you do, you'll see that these two things, and the Buddha has pointed these out, and you think, wow, he really knew what he's talking about. So part of his teaching will have been thoroughly understood and experienced by you, and you'll think, this makes me think that he might know what he's talking about in regard to other things as well. Depending on your own nature, if you're an extreme skeptic, you're going to doubt everything, and you're going to make problems for yourself, because extreme skepticism is a very unsatisfactory state to dwell in. And also extreme naive faith is also an uncomfortable way to dwell, because you believe everything that's being told you. And skepticism is you believe nothing that's being told you. Both of those are unsatisfactory ways of looking at the world. And there's somewhere in between that we have to, because the world is not known to us, and yet we have to carefully consider and make movements into the unknown, whether we like it or not. And we can't stay still in pure skepticism, and we can't embrace everything, because we might embrace the wrong thing. So there you're left with the human dilemma and the problem of existence. And the Buddha has suggestions for that as well. And when you use those, you might feel better, and you think, yeah, he was right again. So that's a little bit on this. Next question.
Ajahn, our next question is from Anonymous in Los Angeles, California, United States. I am a manic depressive and have been so all of my life. Luckily for me, I respond readily to medication and have heard much from the wise. This thing is 80% genetic, explained to me as, quote, if you have the gene but not the stimulus, you go nowhere. If you have the stimulus but not the gene, you go nowhere. But if you have the stimulus and the gene, we're off to the races. What does the Buddha have to say about mental illness?
The Buddha has a lot to say about mental illness, and sometimes the cause is trauma. And we see some cases where people were driven out of their minds by, the shocking events of life. There was a woman who lost 2 children and her parents on the same day. And she went out of her mind, and she was walking around naked and disheveled. And she eventually came to the Buddha, and the Buddha recognized that this woman is being traumatized by life, loss of everything that's meaningful to her, and she's out of her mind because of trauma. And he says in a very calm and focused way, regain your mindfulness, woman. Regain your mindfulness. And this is the first word, is like the beginning of things, is to get your center, find your center again. And she did. And eventually she becomes a nun and becomes enlightened. So those are samples of what genuine, what we call PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, inflicted by life. And there's so many opportunities for this in life. So you have a condition manic depression. By the way, that's kind of the old-fashioned way, isn't it? It's usually called bipolar these days. Anyway, I've had a lot of people come to the monastery with bipolar, and they seem to, yes, they do benefit from meditation and Dhamma. And I suppose why is that one of the elements is, the stimulus is decreased. The chances of the stimulus and the genetic tendency have been decreased. One of the factors, the stimulus, is like the mind is racing or going out of, you're in certain circumstances which provoke a manic episode. This is, you can reduce the chances of that. Some people go decades without an episode, etc. So, but we, from a Buddhist point of view, we don't deny that it's a psychiatric condition. We don't deny that there's genetic elements to it, but we would also suggest that there is a karmic element to it. That this is some carryover from past life that provokes this bipolar experience, and that one way to purify the mind and overcome that is through, commitment to virtue, to good, wise counsel, to associate with the wise that understand your situation, understand who you are, and to practice systematic spiritual exercises to reduce the probability of it kicking in and sweeping you away. So that is kind of how Buddhism would see this. I mean, I've been thinking about these things for 40 years now, and I eagerly read all the psychiatric accounts, the neurological accounts, all of the medicines and all of these things, and I have people coming to me, and I need to have something decent to say that's not just some wacky spiritual claim. There's people who want to lay hands on you and just cure you, or that's not going to happen. This is a profound condition, and it needs to be treated sensibly and carefully. Yeah. So actually, we have come to the end of our hour now, and so we will bring this to an end today.